Hello and welcome. I'm Jono Hayes and you're watching W News broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios. And these are our top stories. The US Senate passes a crucial funding bill which could bring the longest government shutdown in history to an end. A US official has announced that Syria is joining the global coalition against ISIS, hours after President Ahmed al-Sharaa meets President Trump for historic talks at the White House. Police in India are exploring all possibilities after a deadly car explosion in Delhi kills at least 13 people. To our top story, a crucial funding bill in the US has been passed by the Senate, which could now bring the longest government shutdown in history to an end. The bill passed in a 60-40 vote and it will now have to go to the House of Representatives. If it passes there, it will go to President Donald Trump to sign it into effect, something that he said he'd be willing to do yesterday. We're going to go live now to Washington and speak to Republican strategist Adolfo Franco. Adolfo, thanks for joining us. First of all, Republicans are calling this the breakthrough that ends the shutdown. Is this actually a big win from your side, politically speaking?
Oh, absolutely. We have to remember that 40 days ago, when this started, approximately 40 days ago, the Republicans offered exactly what now has been the agreement, which we would have a vote on the Obama care subsidies and a negotiation on what fixes needed to be made. And this is essentially what has happened. In addition, which hasn't gotten much press, there were a lot of other things in that demand. The Democrats had demanded that those subsidies be included in legislation in any deal, meaning paid up front before they would even discuss reforms. And all kinds of things like refunding public TV in the United States and a host of other things. All those things have been dropped. So yes, it is exactly what the Republicans offered 40 days ago. It has to be characterized as a victory for the Republican Party.
What about the comments from President Trump saying that he broke Chuck Schumer? Is that going to help or is it going to hurt this bipartisanship? And the next deadline is just around the corner.
Well, we have to remember a couple of things. In this country, it's so polarized. I can't imagine the remarks the president make are going to hurt or help. There isn't anything to help. You have to remember that Senator Schumer is the leader and is still opposed to reopening the government. 40 Democrats, including Senator Schumer, did not sign on to this deal. So the polemics are high on both sides. Schumer has said awful things about the president. The president has said nasty things about Senator Schumer. But this isn't a bipartisan deal. Had this been 100 senators or the leader, meaning Senator Schumer, have been on board, then I think it's a different story. But he still outraged Senator Schumer, not only at the Democrats, but at President Trump. So I don't think it can hurt any more than other things that have been said in the past.
So now we'll see the federal workers, they're set to return to their offices. Many are still out of pocket. So what do we know about what's going to be done to help them if they need it?
Well, of course, they have missed 2 paychecks, which is significant for people who live paycheck to paycheck. All this money is paid immediately upon return. I've been through, I think, about 9 shutdowns, including when I was in the federal government in a political position, but still. What happens is that payment is made instantly once the government returns. So there really isn't much that can be done on this. This is longer than any other shutdown. But again, it depends who you want to blame on this. This same deal we just agreed to yesterday could have been agreed to 40 days ago because there was a Republican proposal. So if they're angry at anyone, they should be angry at Democrats. Just as an aside, in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, a very liberal senator, Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, voted to reopen the government because federal workers represent about 1 million people in Virginia. So that tells you, to your question, how concerned he was about continued delay of a shutdown.
And of course, continued delay for 41 million Americans who rely on subsidies and food stamps to make ends meet. Will they now also be back paid for everything that they've missed out on so far?
Yes, they will. And of course, one of the things that happened happily in this bill is that the agriculture appropriations bill, the money comes from that pot of money, is actually part of the agreement to fund that. So for the rest of the year, so that won't be subject to any future potential shutdown. Because remember, this agreement is only good through January 30th, and when we're back to some negotiations for the remainder of the year, except for the food programs, because the agricultural appropriations bill is going to be part of this package. But keep in mind that the Republicans 40 days ago, since this bill was ready to go, had offered to actually move on this bill while keeping the rest of the government shut down if they wish to do so, and the Democrats declined it. So this SNAP program, which is the food aid program in the U.S., that could have been funded from day one while they still pursued their 40-day shutdown. They chose not to do so.
And Adolfo, you mentioned it very quickly there, but are we just moving the goalposts here ever so slightly, because we'll be back at the table here again at the end of January? Are we just pressing pause on another crisis that could be on the way, do you think?
Excellent question. It depends on in December. Part of the deal is there's an offer for the Democrats to offer a Obama credits or subsidies bill for the Congress. If that is enacted in December, then I don't think we're going to be back to the same crisis situation. And if it is not, if it is defeated, because the majority is Republican, it's an up and down vote, then I think there is a potential to repeat this. But I have to say, there's a lot of Republican sentiment that some of these subsidies, at least in part, need to be provided along with reforms. So I think the chances of another shutdown are smaller. Also, and keep in mind that it is January, which is already 2026, mid-year elections in the U.S., and there probably will be little appetite to repeat the disruptions in the food program and the flight delays in our country. So politically, it'd be hard for either party to really want to go through a shutdown again. So I venture to say in December, there'll be a compromise on healthcare.
As you did mention, the flight delays there as well. And now there's a push to get everyone back to Washington as quick as possible. President Trump has given a warning to air traffic staff that they could face those consequences for missing work. Perhaps maybe an overstep?
Well, you have to remember there's a sweetener as well. President Trump has said that those who have reported to work are going to receive, he proposed a $10,000 bonus just for reporting to work. So I think he's rewarding those that are reporting back to work. But I don't believe that's an overstep. I've been in Washington since the Reagan administration. In 1982, President Reagan fired all of the air traffic controllers because they went on strike. At that time, it was against the law to go on strike. And President Reagan fired the entire air controller community. So I think it's an essential service. It is part of what they sign up for. It's like a military service. So I don't think it's an overstep. And there's a sweetener here. If you report to work, you get $10,000.
It is a sweet deal, but is there a risk for the Trump administration or for President Trump himself at this stage to alienate some of the moderates with the way that he is claiming this as somewhat of a victory from his point of view?
Well, in my assessment, of course, I have a Republican point of view. I don't think he is alienating the moderates because, A, you have 8 Democratic senators who have joined in with the proposal that was supported by the Republicans and President Trump. So you already have moderates in this way. You know, Senator King, a Democrat from Maine, has said this just isn't working. And the polls indicated increasingly in this country, initially the Democrats were favored and the Republicans are blamed for the shutdown, but now it's become even. And with every day that moved forward, they read the polls. That's why you had this change of heart, in addition to a major holiday coming in the United States that would have ensnarled air travel. So for that reason, I believe it won't hurt with the centrist. And you will have Democrats join in the House as well to support this, not a large number, to support this measure along with virtually every other Republican. Last point is, keep in mind that 15 times Republicans put forward a proposal to reopen the government with Democratic votes in the House and in the Senate. It was just a minority of the left in the Senate, a minority through their procedural ability to do so, that put an obstacle and a stumbling block to move forward. So I think the majority of the country will eventually see this as a Trump victory.
Adolfo Franco, Republican strategist, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to stay on this topic. And we're going to speak now to Dr. Nick Lamson, who's a former Democratic congressman for Texas. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Nick. First and foremost, Democrats are split here. Was this a vote of practicality? Was there some political pain that perhaps swayed this vote? What happened?
Well, practicality. We had to do something to move forward with the deadlock. No one was winning. This hurts everyone. It hurts both parties. It hurts the people of the United States of America. Keep in mind, we believe we are great because we are good. We're good to our citizens. We are good to the citizens of the world. And this was showing something that was not good. We are desirous of helping people. We believe in the Beatitudes that we are to do unto others as we would have them do unto us. And I think that's the way that our government has reflected over the last many, many years. This was contrary to that. So it was necessary.
Let's talk about President Trump's comments in regards to Chuck Schumer, saying that he broke Chuck Schumer. Now he's under pressure from within his own ranks. So how fragile is his leadership there in Washington?
Well, it is fragile, and leadership is something that is missing in the United States of America right now. Good leaders are capable of pulling opposite interests together into a compromise. So we did not show good leadership in any aspects of what we have been involved with. Yes, the Republicans voted 13 times or some number of times on the same concept. That was not totally true. There were pieces added to it. We clearly saw that there was concessions made about who was going to be paid when they came back to work, and about people not being continued to be fired from positions. So yes, there were some successes for the Democrats in doing this. The people of the United States of America right now are truly divided, and that there are those in a major part of it that want to see us take control as we the people of this government. And right now, we don't have the feeling that we, the people, are in control of the government. It's being controlled more and more by one individual, the President of the United States. That's not what our Constitution provides for, and it's something that we need to have expressed. And I think that was part of the consternation that led to this shutdown. While I don't think there's going to be another shutdown anytime soon, I hope and pray that there's not. There has to be a way for the people to exert their interests, and the interests are to make sure that this is truly a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, not for any special interests.
After weeks without pay, now we're going to see federal workers finally getting back on the job once again. What do you think the lessons are that have been learned in Washington from this standoff, which has gone on for such a long period?
Quit blaming each other. This is really not about I don't like you and you don't like me. It's about we have problems that face us and we need solutions to the problems, and we need leadership that is capable of pulling people together into compromise. For the first 200 plus years of our history, and we're celebrating our 250th coming up shortly, magnificent for our democracy, for our democratic republic. But if we don't have leadership that can unite us, pull us into a situation where people are willing to compromise, where we do so with civility, with thoughtfulness of each other, with truly what we're supposed to be about, which is to love one another. It's what I've been taught for all of my 80 years of life. And I believe that I'm a public servant. I believe that I went to Congress because I believe in my community, and I wanted to see us become a better place in which to live. That's the direction that I think that we need to be working on, and what I would hope that we continue to see. So quit demeaning individuals. Quit making it about someone else. Quit pointing the finger at the other guy. Take the responsibility, take the leadership role, and make a difference for the United States of America and the people within it.
Dr. Nick, I guess no love is lost, though, in politics. If you look ahead to January, and you said you don't foresee a shutdown again, but the Democrats, are they prepared to dig their heels in if there's no broader deal reached here, do you think?
Well, I think we've shown that the people don't mind us doing anything, including shutting the government down, because I believe it was that the people of the United States were supporting it. None of us wanted to see the hurt that was going on for the air traffic controllers, the chaos within our air traffic system, the lack of food that goes to individuals who are needy, but also the lack of purchasing food from the farmers who grow it. All of those people were adversely impacted through this whole effort. We don't want to see that again. But I think that there is also a feeling that if you don't play fair, if you don't treat me like I'm an equal citizen, then we will rebel. And that was a part of a rebellion that was felt by a lot of people. So no one wants to go through another shutdown. But I would say, don't take that off of the table. We've got to have some victory for the folks that are in need in this nation today.
Now, I will go back to what Adolfo said a few moments ago when we spoke to him 40 days ago. This plan was already in place. So why is it taking so long to action it, which, as you rightly said, people who suffered, and let's not just talk about the civil servants and the people who are in office jobs, but it's everybody, right down to people who are on SNAP every single week. Those are the people who really suffered. Why did it take so long to action this, do you think?
Because of the strong feelings that exist in the country right now. We have a feeling that our Constitution is under attack, that we are not following the rules that we have followed since 1776, when our Constitution was adopted, 1777. We're losing some of the goodness of America right now. And we don't want to see that. We don't want to see us go back to what we rebelled against from Great Britain in 1775 and 6. Our independence was really about creating a trial and error program that had failed in many other situations in the world prior to 1776, but the people came together and decided we would follow a constitution that really put control of the government into the hands of we, the citizens, we, the people. So it's by the people, for the people, and of the people that we want our constitution to be followed. And I think that there is a willingness that's being shown to do whatever is necessary to make sure that that Constitution is followed, stays strong, and that we keep the goodness of America that we have shown in the first 250 years of our history.
Dr. Nick Lampson in Texas, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
A US official has said Syria is joining the global coalition against ISIS. The announcement was made just hours after President Donald Trump welcomed his Syrian counterpart, Ahmed al-Sharaa, for historic talks at the White House. After their meeting, al-Sharaa also told Fox News Channel's special report that his association with the al-Qaeda militant group was a matter of the past and was not discussed in Monday's meeting with the US President Donald Trump. Here's some of what he had to say.
Only 19 years old, so I was a very young person, and it didn't have any decision-making power at that time, and I don't have anything to do with it. And Al-Qaeda was not present right then in my area. So you're speaking to the wrong person about this subject. We mourn for every civilian that got killed, and we know that people suffer from the war, especially civilians who paid a price, a hefty price for the war. We talked about the president and the future. We talked about the investment opportunities in the future in Syria, and so that Syria is no longer looked at as a security threat. It is now looked at as a geopolitical ally, and it's a place where the United States can have great investments, especially extracting gas.
For more on this story, we're joined from Damascus by activist and researcher Celine Kassim. Celine, thanks for speaking to us. A Syrian president at the White House for the very first time ever. This is a historic moment. We're fully aware of that. But how important is it for Washington to align itself with Damascus?
Thank you so much for having me. It is very historic and symbolic, and not just for Syria, but for the Middle East. I mean, we all know the Ba'athist ideologies that Syrians grew up on under the Assad regime, the anti-West, anti-imperialist, and anti-neoliberal that Assad continued to speak about. So this shows that it's a completely new chapter for Syria, and a new chapter for Syria's role in the world. And Washington needs to see that as an opportunity to now balance the Middle East and continue its efforts in the peace in the Middle East that it continues to speak about. And I mean, the stability of Syria is the stability of the Middle East, because it is in the middle of a bunch of different conflicts and a bunch of different things that happen. So it's extremely important for Washington and obviously for us as Syrians.
We know that this has been kind of brewing since May the 13th, but Ahmed al-Sharaa was until recently on the US sanctions list. What has changed? What's made this partnership possible as of late?
I mean, what changed is that I think that the world realized that Sharaa is the most effective at running this extremely sensitive time in Syria. I mean, we kind of disassociate the past 15 years and 50 years of how Syrians lived under the Assad regime, you know, the bloody war and the sectarian ideologies of divide and conquer. That leaves a big scar, and it's going to take generations for us to solve. And I think that the world sees that Sharaa is the most effective at this role, and he has shown that he has been, with his pragmatism, strong and precise kind of aspects of running this transition that we are currently going through.
He seems to be the master of changing his image, and he very much seems to have done that on a global scale. Syria joining the anti-ISIS coalition, that is a major shift. Are we seeing genuine cooperation for the first time in recent history?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is genuine responsibility and cooperation, that the current authorities are extremely, aware of this, and they want to work on it, but they do need the help and resources of different forces on the ground. So I think that for them to join this coalition is extremely important. And they have already started. I think they caught around 70 people in Homs and around in Syria that have these affiliations. And this shows that they are very serious about this. And this is going to stabilize Syria and is going to give Syrians a chance at life, especially with the help of different forces as well.
Do you think any of the discussion that was had in the White House revolved around the continued issues with the Druze and the factions that are fighting in smaller villages and towns and enclaves around Syria? Or do you think that was off the table and this was very much about the forward progression of Syria, and you see those as issues that al-Sharaa will deal with on a local level himself?
I mean, obviously, again and again, we as Syrians, and I think the international community have made it very clear that Syria is one of the most diverse countries in the Middle East, and it is very important that every single Syrian feels safe and feels at home and feels that they belong to their country. So this is extremely important and continues to be talked about here in Damascus and all over Syria. But I don't know if it made it to the White House meeting. And this is something to be discussed, I think, but it is very complicated, and a lot of work is being done on it. I just don't know how much further we're moving along from the different factions in Sweda and Damascus as well.
This has been a big change. It's been in a very short period of time. We're talking 4 months ago since this was first discussed, and I don't know if anybody saw this at the time, but we have to remember, historically speaking at least, Damascus having strong ties to both Moscow and to Tehran, and the US seeing this as an opportunity to have a stronghold in the Middle East, and potentially we're hearing now echoes of a military base. The US allies, how do you think they're going to view this very sudden change?
I mean, I think this needs to be seen as the opportunity that it is. This is a new era of the Middle East, and we keep hearing this phrase with various different geopolitical changes and balances that are changing every day. I mean, yesterday it was the axis of resistance. Today, we don't know what it is. That is almost done. I mean, they're still dealing with that in Lebanon, but it's almost done in the region. And the real question is, what is coming next? And I think that this is an opportunity for the international community to realize that the Middle East needs to get to a point where it rules itself by itself and it is able to get to a point of peace without all of these different interferences and Israel bombing us every other day and continuing to interfere in everyday life. So it's a bit of understanding that this is an opportunity that needs to be worked on from all sides altogether.
Celine Kassim, activist and researcher in Damascus, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Police in India are exploring all possibilities after an explosion in Delhi killed at least 13 people and injured 20. There is no official confirmation yet on what caused the blast, which occurred when a slow-moving vehicle stopped at a red light on Monday. Chris Gilbert has more.
Grief struck Delhi on Tuesday as families mourned loved ones killed in a fiery explosion the day before. The blast occurred near the historic Red Fort on Monday evening, a rare occurrence in the heavily guarded city of more than 30 million people. The 17th century monument is usually visited by thousands of tourists daily and is now closed for 3 days as investigations proceed. Officials say they've identified a number of the dead and post-mortems are being carried out. Several states and key facilities across the country have been placed on high alert as police investigate under India's major anti-terrorism laws. They say the investigation is ongoing.
Once we are able to find out hard facts, then only we will be able to comment upon it conclusively.
First responders at the scene say it was gruesome.
When we reached the blast site, we could find only bodies. The bodies were in parts, and we had to pick different parts and bring them back in the ambulances to the hospital.
Members of the police forensic team have been working throughout Tuesday to survey the area as armed guards patrolled the site. Foreign experts are also on site seeking evidence. Relatives of the victims gathered outside the Loknayak hospital early on Tuesday seeking information on the victims of the blast.
We tried to call him but couldn't reach out to him. Authorities told us to come to the hospital. When we came here, we had to identify the body. They didn't allow us in easily, but eventually we got in for identification. We'll proceed with the post-mortem.
The government says the police investigation will soon be made public. The defence minister is vowing those responsible will be brought to justice. Security has been tightened all across Delhi. World leaders from Egypt, the US, the EU, France and Iran have expressed their sympathies online. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is currently travelling in Bhutan but says he has held discussions with the defence minister and sends his condolences to the families of the victims. Chris Gilbert, Al-Arabiya English.
Now let's take a look at some of the other stories that are making the headlines today. At least 6 people have died after super typhoon Fenghuang hit the Philippines, bringing floods, landslides and widespread power outages. More than 1.4 million people were evacuated ahead of the storm, which is now heading towards Taiwan. At least 12 people were killed and 27 injured in a suicide bombing outside Islamabad's district courts. The blast sparked panic in the area, which also houses government offices, and paramilitary forces quickly cordoned off the site. No group has claimed responsibility, but the Pakistani Prime Minister has blamed terrorist proxies backed by India. Ukraine says its forces have struck Russia's Saratov oil refinery overnight, sparking explosions and also a major fire around the site. The military also reported hitting the Sea Oil terminal in Russian-occupied Crimea and a warehouse occupied in Donetsk. Kiev has stepped up long-range strikes in recent weeks, targeting key Russian fuel and logistics hubs. A Chinese woman who fled to London after allegedly stealing billions from pensioners through a fake cryptocurrency scheme has been sentenced to over 11 years in prison. Police say 47-year-old Jian Shiyem has pleaded guilty to money laundering after UK police seized more than 61,000 Bitcoin worth over $6 billion. The case led to one of the largest crypto seizures in UK history. Victims hope any recovered funds are returned to them. To our next story, the outgoing Director General of the BBC, Tim Davie, has told staff that the organisation will be thriving and praised its journalism. He quit on Sunday night after the BBC was accused of bias over an edit it made in a speech by President Donald Trump for Panorama. His latest remarks come a day after Trump threatened to sue the corporation for $1 billion. He's given them until Friday to apologise. Here's more of what Davey had to say earlier today.
Just want to say a couple of things. I'm here to lead and support the BBC. I'm very, very proud of our journalists in this building. They're doing work I think that's incredibly important. I want to thank every one of them. They're doing a wonderful job. Also, everyone across the BBC doing their thing for the UK, and personally, I'm here to lead and support them. The BBC's going to be thriving, and I support every one of the team. I'm very proud of them. Thank you very much, Johan. Great to see you.
For more on this story, we're joined from London by correspondent Stuart Smith, who's there at the BBC. Stuart, what's the reaction like? How are the staff at the BBC reacting today after Davies' comments? Is it panic? Is it frustration? Is it determination? Because this ship is pretty rocky right now. It seems like something needs to steady it a bit.
Yeah, so the steadying message you heard there from Tim Davie, the outgoing Director General, who will stay on until a replacement is found. That's the official message coming from the BBC, that these resignations will assist with dealing with the consequences of that leak, of that very critical memo about how the BBC operates. But internally, I think the other adjectives used to describe the situation would be more appropriate. Perhaps not panic, but certainly a realisation that this is unprecedented. To have the head of news and the Director General resign on the same day over a host of issues, to have a lawsuit threatened by a sitting US president, that's all unprecedented. And it does mean changes will have to come to the BBC, and so there's nervousness about what that means for staff, though potentially those changes might be coming, say, 2026, 2027, either ahead or after a review of how the BBC operates. But a few ex-journalists from the BBC have been speaking, one of them saying that the mood inside is sulphurous and mutinous, according to one. Another one described the situation with the senior executives of the BBC as snakes, because there is also this fear that what has transpired, what has happened, was no innocent leak. It was a deliberate ploy, according to some BBC journalists that I've spoken to who believe this, in order to try to change the top-tier management at the BBC, and in doing so either have more power for themselves or align the way the BBC works closer to the direction that they would want to take it.
In Trump terms, a $1 billion lawsuit threat is not that much money when you compare it to some of the other ones he's taken previously. But how real of a risk is it for the BBC?
Well, the BBC has around 8 to 9 billion US dollars of revenue, so 1 billion for the BBC would be an extraordinary amount of money. Having said that, lawyers both here in the UK and the US have questioned the validity of that figure. It's effectively a number pulled out of thin air, they say. As to the reality of whether a lawsuit could go ahead, that partially depends on, for example, whether it was attempted here in the UK or the United States, with all indications so far that if it got to that stage, we would be talking about a US lawsuit. And if that is the case, of course, there's the First Amendment in the United States relating to free speech is something the BBC could potentially rely on. Also, Donald Trump has a history of doing this, both sending these threatening letters and then no action taking place, or where libel action did continue, those not being very successful in the courts. So at this stage, it could be as simple as this is meant to be a warning to the BBC. As to what it will actually do, whether the BBC will try and settle this some other way or whether even the UK government might get involved, all remains to be seen.
Stuart, we're hearing that the UK government is reviewing the licence fee model because, of course, the public in the UK are funding the BBC. A controversy like this, could that accelerate the sweeping change? And you mentioned 2026, but could we see something happen in the very near future as a result?
It's certainly the talk of most of the political parties here in the UK. For example, the current political party with the highest rating in the polls is the Reform UK party, led by Nigel Farage, who has suggested that it's an unsustainable model, that people who want to watch live television, not just the BBC but other channels too, must contribute this $230 a year licence fee to the public purse, which is then distributed to the BBC. And this model has existed for decades but is becoming, many say, less and and less sustainable. The government at the moment has deliberately not preempted any of the potential outcomes of that review into how the BBC makes money and what its purpose should be. That will likely take place next during all these discussions about that charter renewal as it's known. But in the meantime, as well as these in the short term, these resignations certainly show that somebody at the BBC believes something needs to change. But in terms of what we didn't hear from Tim Davie, for example, about what that could be at the moment, but I think people are braced for some kind of change. The number of things that were listed by that independent advisor in terms of the kinds of misrepresentations that were taking place at a high editorial level means I think people realise that something has to give here.
Stuart, just before we leave you go, about 48 hours left to go until President Trump's ultimatum expires. We've heard of these two resignations, which, let's be honest, there isn't a higher level possible for your Director General and your CEO to leave. Other heads may have rolled, and you'll know more than I about this. Is that going to be enough to stave off Trump and the $1 billion lawsuit, do you think?
Well, he had in his lawsuit drawn up by his lawyer a list of 3 separate requirements for him to be placated, and one of them was a full and fair retraction of the Panorama documentary, as well as any other, quote, false, defamatory, disparaging, misleading and inflammatory statements about Donald Trump. Perhaps the BBC could try that, because it has already apologised and admitted there was wrongdoing. The second one is to apologise for the Panorama documentary, but the third part of this, to avoid a lawsuit taking place, Donald Trump's lawyer says that Mr. Trump must be appropriately compensated, and that seems unlikely, to put it mildly. The BBC to compensate Donald Trump with effectively taxpayer and licence fee money. The prospect of that is already causing anger and concern amongst the British public, some of whom effectively feel like they would be paying Donald Trump for this mistake that the BBC made. So that in itself would be a very controversial avenue to go down. On the other hand, if it fights any potential lawsuit, that itself would cost money, and perhaps more important than even the money would be the reputational damage for the BBC, which is still seen globally as a very respectable broadcaster when it comes to so many issues. The global damage from this could be really the biggest hit that the BBC may have to take.
Stuart Smith, thank you so much for joining us in London at the BBC. Now let's take a look at the top business news for today. The Swedish textile startup behind H&M Group, Saya, have said they've got plans to raise as much as $700 million in funding to build a clothing manufacturing factory in Vietnam. This follows a supply deal with Nike, which says the company will help unlock new capital. As part of the Nike contract, the firm aims to operate about a dozen plants globally, producing around 3 million tonnes of recycled polyester. SoftBank has sold its entire stake in the US chipmaker Nvidia for over $5 billion. The Japanese company is looking to fund its investment in artificial intelligence. SoftBank's second quarter net profit doubled, driven by valuation gains in OpenAI. And turning to sport now. Italy's Yannick Sinner began his title defence at the ATP finals against Canadian Felix Auger-Aliassime. The pair were meeting for the 4th time since August. Sinner overpowered the Canadian, who needed medical attention during the second set. The win put Sinner at the top of the Bjorn Borg group as he bids to secure the year-end world #1 ranking. English football team Nottingham Forest have responded to Manchester United's interest in signing midfielder Elliot Anderson for an estimated $130 million. Anderson moved to Nottingham Forest in July in 2024 for $45 million from Newcastle. The 23-year-old was recently called up to be part of the team in England's final 2026 World Cup qualifiers. And a final reminder of our top stories. The US Senate passes a crucial funding bill, which could bring the longest government shutdown in history to an end. A US official announces Syria is joining the global coalition against ISIS. That's hours after President Ahmed al-Sharaa met with President Trump for historic talks in the White House. Police in India are exploring all possibilities after a deadly car explosion in Delhi kills at least 13 people. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget, as always, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can follow us on X, and we're back in just a couple of hours with W News Extra. But for now, goodbye.